Welcome and good afternoon and good morning to some of you. My name is Chris Kahn, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Unitrends. I'll be your host today, along with my two esteemed guests, Justin and Tommy. They will be taking you through the content today. So thrilled with the content. I think these guys are going to give you all exactly what you're looking for. But before we get started, I just want to take care of a few housekeeping items. So today, everybody's in all listen mode, but if you do want to ask a question, feel free to use the chat function there on the right-hand side. Myself and Tommy will be looking through the chat as questions come in, and if we have time at the end, we will be sure to get those answered for you guys. And if we don't answer them on today's call, we'll be sure to follow up with you guys. We want to make sure that we do keep this to as best we can, 30 minutes. This is a big topic, but an exciting topic nonetheless. The other thing that we will do is post the webinar. We will absolutely share this out with you guys. That way you can reference it, or if you had a colleague that could not join us today, you could share it with them. Other than that, that's pretty much it for housekeeping items. I'd like to introduce you to Justin, who many of you may know already, and Tommy as well. And I'll get out of the way, step aside, and let these guys take you through the content today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Justin.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris. So, hey, everybody. My name is Justin Thal. If you aren't familiar with me, I'm the Senior Evaluation Engineer at Unitrends, and I've been working with the company direct over 5 years, and I've been a customer for many more than that. But today what we're going to do is we're going to cover how to do Windows backups. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics here today, like what kind of RPOs you're looking for, how to test your machines, and how to validate that you're meeting your RPO goals, and things of that nature. We're also going to talk about some new features that you may not be aware of, like our new image level backups, which is available for new Windows machines. We'll talk about where you should be using these types of backups, and also linking to documentation that'll help you do the research further on this, because there is obviously a lot to cover. Our agenda for today is going to be obviously, we're going to talk about the agent versus agentless, so whether or not you have a Unitrends agent installed on the machine, or whether or not you're doing a snapshot-based backup. This could be from Nutanix, VMware, Hyper-V, or Citrix Zen, of course, for the agentless side of it. But something new that we've added is an image-level backup that allows us to do functionally the same thing as we do with an agentless backup for physical servers. We'll talk about that in depth here shortly, but we're going to talk about all the best practices and what kinds of backups you should do, applications, recovery assurance, and all the troubleshooting stuff that we typically see on a daily basis. To first talk about our agent versus agentless versus image level, on our support website, we've actually got a KB that walks through this, that tells you all the information that you might want to know about when you should do one particular type of backup or another. This is something that we're going to recommend that you actually look at and evaluate servers by before making a decision, if you're not familiar with how you should be doing your backups. Let me go ahead and pull this up over here. So as we scroll down in this page, you'll see that as we scroll down, the image level backups in specific, they don't support clustered nodes because they actually work off of block-based data. We install our own change block tracking driver into Windows that can allow us to do change block tracking on physical servers. This, among other things, are covered throughout this, but we're going to go over the most basic ones that we typically see throughout this demonstration. So for now, we're going to go ahead and come back here. Just one moment. So we're going to talk about Windows best practices and do a demonstration here. Let's make sure that everybody has all the prerequisite knowledge on how to add an asset and how to make a schedule first, and talk about the best practices around that. So from our Unitrends appliance here, let me refresh the page. Here we go. So to add an asset to the Unitrends system, we come to the Configure menu here, and then from the Protected Assets menu, we can add in our assets. If we're adding something like VMware, we want to add each of the individual ESX hosts as well as the vCenter, as you can see down here. But if we're working with physical Windows hosts, the agent can easily be gotten from either the support website or from the Unitrends appliance itself. You'll see there's a Windows agents directory here that has the 64 and 32-bit agents already included. Once you've installed these agents, they'll actually ask you whether or not you want to install the change block tracking driver. And again, you're going to want to review the support KV to determine whether or not that system is eligible for an image-based backup. Once the agent has been installed, you can, of course, click Add here and choose Asset. And then from there, if the agent hasn't already been installed, and you can try to use the agent push if you'd like, if the agent's already been installed, just put in the host name and the IP address of the system and then hit Save, and that adds the asset to the list. From there, we would choose to make our backup schedule from the Protect menu, choosing Backup up on the top because we want to protect the machine with a backup. From there, you can see we can drill down in this list, and we're looking at file-level backups. It's important to note that a file-level backup will not back up services like SQL or Exchange because we automatically detect them, and we know that they can't be backed up through a normal file-level backup. In those cases, what we want to do is we would want to have a secondary application backup that would allow us to target the individual services. So let's go ahead and talk through the file-level portion first. We check the box for the machine, and over on the right-hand side, we can see you have an Edit menu with inclusion or exclusion lists. If you need to exclude any files, you can, of course, browse the file system and find any files or folders that you wanted to exclude. From there, you can simply select any of them and choose them on the right-hand side to have them selected to be excluded from your backup. But assuming that we didn't want to exclude anything, we would just simply hit Next and set up our scheduling here, which is Incremental Forever. Incremental Forever, if you're not familiar with it, is our ability to take our first initial full and then run incrementals forever. With Windows machines, this typically uses something called change log journaling, which is a feature of NTFS that allows us to keep track of what files have changed since the last backup. With the new image level agent that we're about to talk about, it actually allows us to do block level changes where we're only picking up whatever sectors on disk have changed. The biggest difference where you would see that is if you were backing up a PST file, for example. If I put one email in that PST, I have to back the whole PST up again. Versus at the change block tracking level, I'd only have to pick up whatever sectors on disk changed. So it's a much more efficient backup and can be much faster than any other type. Now, of course, the concern comes from most of our customers, well, if I run incrementals forever, won't I have to restore all of those incrementals to get to that point in time? The answer is no. Our system is smart enough to automatically generate what's called a new synthetic full at a minimum of every 2 weeks. It's going to go back over the previous backups, and it's going to determine what data has been deleted from that system since our last backup. That way, if we need to purge off the older deleted data to make room for new backups to land, we can do that automatically. So once you've set up your basic schedules for your file-level backups, we would continue on to make any other schedules that we wanted to do. Like for SQL here, you can see that as we drill down underneath the system, that I can target the individual SQL databases with their own backup schedule. Because this is in the full recovery model, which I can tell by hovering over the database with my mouse here, I know that I can run fulls, differentials, and transactionals. If the database was only in the simple recovery model, you can only run fulls and differentials. Transaction logs are kind of like incrementals where they're cumulative. It's everything that changed since the last transaction log, versus a differential is always everything that changed since the last full. On the next page here, of course, we can make that scheduling very easily with a full backup happening every X versus a transactional backup happening every Y. If you wanted that to reoccur more often, of course, you would just simply check the box here to do that as well. So those features in and of themselves are the things that we've had along for a very long time. Our basic mentality for doing a backup is that it should be backed up once a day, every day at bare minimum for most systems. Anything that's a critical server, it should be backed up more often, just depending on how much data you're willing to lose, commonly referred to as your RPO or your recovery point objective. So we'll talk about recovery point objectives a little bit further when we get into the validation steps, but let's go ahead and continue on to talk about the image level backup. So you'll notice in here some of these have exclamation points that indicate that they aren't allowed to be done with the image level backup, either because the driver isn't available, which does require a reboot, or because they're running systems that we can't support. For example, clustered shared volumes, storage spaces, dynamic volumes, and things like that aren't supported. This is covered in our admin guide here, specifically under the Windows Image Level Backups overview, Unitrends UI, by simply clicking the question mark in the UI and going to the online help here. Once you're in here, you can see under Image Level Backups overview, we talk about all the different features between the two. And more specifically, we have the best practices and requirements. So you can see here things like, for example, storage spaces, CSVs, Active Directory, stuff like that. Typically isn't recommended for this, but where you would have a large file server with millions and millions of small files, image level is the absolute best thing that we can use there because it will allow us to have source-side dedupe. It will allow us to do block-based tracking, and it allows us another feature that we're about to talk about that's normally only for VMs, known as instant recovery. So if I'm doing a Windows image-based backup, now that we've talked about how to make schedules and what those should be, once you've run the backup jobs from our backup catalog, we can see all the jobs that we've completed. Just a moment here. So over on the right-hand side, you can see what application was backed up. For example, this was a file-level backup using our agent versus a VM-level snapshot that was done through VMware. To do a restore from this machine, we would just expand it out, select the point in time that we wanted to recover from, and choose Recover Files up at the top. I can come through here and select any of the files or folders that I want to restore. And if I want to restore them to a different machine that has the agent installed, that's a valid option as well. I can even do cross-platform restore from Linux to Windows and Windows to Linux as well. With the VM-level backups, things are a little bit different, though it is still the same machine. You'll see here that we have a synthetic full that I mentioned before. These happen automatically. You'll also notice that this machine is under protection because we want to make sure that its retention is maintained for a minimum of 30 days across all of its backups. But to do a restore, it's again just as easy as selecting the point in time you want to recover from, but for a virtual machine, we'll get 3 different options. Recover is a standard offline restore, where it will restore the machine in the offline state to whatever data store you choose. On the next page, you could rename the machine if you wanted to under the pencil icon here and rename that machine. This functionality is very similar for Hyper-V as well. But if you need to do file level recovery from a virtual machine backup or from an image level backup, the process is just slightly different. What we have to do is we actually push together the deduplicated blocks as a single point in time and then mount that to the appliance as a network share, which you can browse to and copy and paste your data out of. When we hit Recover Files here, it starts the process in the background to bind all the backups together. We could even see this in the background if we wanted to. So you can see it's fusing the backups right now. And in a few seconds here, that share will become available and we can browse to it and copy and paste data out. So everybody feel like they've got a pretty good understanding on the backups portion of this so far. Hoping that's coming through clear. Obviously don't have any feedback. So for the file level recovery here, you can see that this is the path that it created on the Unitrends appliance, and we'd be able to browse to this and copy and paste out any of the information that we wanted from that system very quickly and easily. So that's a file level recovery. And that will be the same between both the Windows image level backups and the VM level backups because they're both a block-based backup. So last, of course, is going to be the instant recovery feature. And again, this works for either the VM level or for if we were doing an image level backup, which you can see is noted by this icon here. This particular backup was from a Windows 10 machine, and I can do an instant recovery of this directly into my VM environment without ever having to do any kind of conversion from it, even though it was a physical server to begin with. What we would do is we would choose where we wanted this to be hosted, and if you are running one of our physical Unitrends appliances, you can run these image level backups on your Unitrends appliance as well. But in most cases, customers are going to choose to put this back to their VM environment just because it's usually a good opportunity to go to the boss and say, hey, let's get rid of some of these older physical servers and let's get some more virtual environment. So in this case, I'm going to choose my VMware host here. I'm going to select the VM host that I want it to run from. And the data store that I choose in this case is only going to be used for virtual swap storage because we chose to bring it up in what's called Audit Mode. Audit Mode means that the network adapter will be disabled on the machine, and normally under a live mode, it would start to copy this location, but because we're doing Audit Mode, it's not. So from there, I can hit the next page, stick my initials on the end here, hit save, and the restore begins. So if I come up to Instant Recovery here, click on the backup and hit View Details, I can see that it's creating the data store within VMware. And sure enough, over here, you can see that we created the data store. And in a few more seconds, it'll create the virtual machine. But I'm not going to wait for that. I just want to show you guys that I can do multiple of these from all the different backups that we're doing. and that you guys can see that this is super duper easy to do from any one of these hosts very quickly. So we can have multiple servers coming up under an instant recovery, where they'll come up in my VM environment. So if I had a server that had failed on me, I could have that server back up within minutes. Now, these features in and of themselves are really great in the fact that we're able to bring these servers up quickly and easily from an instant recovery. They are still running from our deduplicated storage, though, which may be not fast enough for some of your more critical applications. We've thought of that as well through what we call our Replicas feature. For any of your physical Windows servers, we can set up Windows replicas, which would actually build out a warm, hot standby copy of that virtual machine or physical server, so you can have a standby copy of it ready to be used at any given time. Same with VMware backups. Anytime we do a VMware backup of a virtual machine, it's very easy to select just the virtual machine that we want to have replicated, and every time that machine gets backed up in one location, we could have it automatically restored to a different virtual host in a different data store automatically. And what it does is it creates a second machine called Replica that automatically gets updated every time the original machine gets backed up. But let's go ahead and take a look at the instant recoveries that we have already. And I can see AD01 is there, and the Win10 machine is here. So as you can see, under the hard disk here, the storage is coming from a data store called Unitrends Instant Recovery. For Hyper-V machines, this is very similar. Instead of using NFS, though, we just use an SMB share. So we're just presenting ourselves as if we were a NAS device to your hypervisor. So I can bring machines up under an instant recovery. I can back up my Windows servers. I know how to add my assets and create those schedules and how to protect my applications. But what good is it if I don't know that these backups are in fact good, whether or not they will boot correctly, whether or not the services will actually start correctly? This is something that we're also able to take care of through something we call data copy access jobs. It's commonly referred to as recovery assurance. The recovery assurance basically allows us to log in through VMware tools, or in the case of Hyper-V, we've actually got an agent made specifically for Hyper-V. And what this does is this allows us to automate this instant recovery process to bring these servers up, log in through VMware tools, and ask the underlying OS whether or not things have started correctly. This can be everything from SQL queries, checking Windows services, and more. This allows you to make sure that no matter what happens to your business, you know exactly how long it'll take for you to recover any business application that you have. In our example in our lab environment here, if we go over to the jobs page, you'll see under the job manager in just a moment that I've created a data copy access job. Underneath this job, you'll see that I specified 3 servers that I want to have tested regularly. And those 3 servers that I chose was an Active Directory controller, because I want to have login services, then a web server and a SQL server, which are both interdependent on each other as well. On the next page, I chose the options for the instant recovery, which is the virtual host I want it to run from, as well as the network that I want it to be on. Within VMware, I created a sandbox network, which is basically just another virtual network with no network adapters attached. You can do the same thing within Hyper-V from the virtual switch manager just by creating a private virtual switch. Once that's created, what this allows is it allows all of the virtual machines to come up, but with their network adapter enabled to the sandbox network. So all the machines within that network can talk to each other. Because this also allows us to do a live mode failover, this also allows you to choose whatever data store you'd want them to be copied to, while also choosing how old you're willing to let your data be, so how much data you're willing to lose, and how long this job can take to run. On the next page, we would choose how often we wanted the virtual machines to be tested, and then from there, we can define the options for those tests. Under my Active Directory controller, I specified the guest credentials that allow me to log in, and I specified the boot order group of 1. Under the tests, I checked to see whether or not Active Directory domain services were available, but those tests can be anything from custom scripting or after-the-fact malware scans, and we can even do things like checking Windows services, URLs, SQL queries, and more, so you know beyond a shadow of a doubt whether or not the services will come back up. In our demonstration, what we've chosen to do is we have it testing the Active Directory services and then SQL services, things like that. And to run those tests, we just simply click the Run Test button up here, and it starts the instant recovery, stands the machines up, logs in through VMware Tools, and then tears the whole thing down and tells you how long it all took. That's what we call our Recovery Assurance Report. And if we generate this report right here, you'll see what we do is we start the instant recovery, reconfigure it to put it on the sandbox network, then power it on in the boot order group we defined, then validate those services. Because I wanted to make sure Active Directory was up before anything else was, it completed those tests in the boot order group of 1. Then it started the next boot order group and validated their services. And once it was all done, it tore it all down to update the compliance report. The compliance report is the at-a-glance report that tells you exactly how old your backups are as of this minute and exactly how long they take to boot. So you'll see down on the bottom here, I can see exactly how old my backups are and exactly how long they take to boot. I've also found that there's an unintended consequences of this. If you start to see that these numbers start to go up, it's usually because you have pending Windows updates that need to be installed that are trying to install on the next time the machine is booted. So it can let you know that you have potential reboots that need to be done as well. But more importantly, this lets you know exactly what the impact of an outage is on your business and that the application will actually work. And the features don't stop there with data copy access because we can also use this for testing any of your business applications. If you package that business application up so you can run tests on a regular basis on it, you can also use that so you can stand up lab copies of that entire business application just by simply choosing Instant Lab, selecting the machines that you'd like to boot out of the job, as well as what point in time you'd like to boot, the green ones, of course, being certified as known good. If your developer ever comes to you and says, hey, I need a test environment so I can do a deployment and make sure it doesn't break things, this is a great way to do it. If you've got a hot fix you're about to apply for a business application, you can bring the whole thing up in a quick and easy environment that you can test the hot fix on and then tear the lab down whenever you're done with it. The same goes if you have that business application fail in its entirety. You can fail over the entire thing just with a simple failover button here. So that covers a lot of the material that we wanted to cover today, but let's go through and let's review. Our file-level backups allow you to do inclusions and exclusions of files and folders. It also gives you a searchable catalog, which isn't something that we talked about. With the image level backups and the VM level backups, because it's a block-based backup, there's no catalog of what's inside of that backup. You have to mount that point in time and then go looking for the files that you'd like. We do find some customers find that they need to search for individual files on a regular basis, and for the ones that are doing the file level backup, this would be possible because it generates a catalog. You would have to hit the search files button here, and then you could just simply search through the asset for whatever file you are looking for, and it will show you all of the ones that exist. Let me go from beginning of month to end of month so it doesn't take forever. Like so. So you could see the different days that it's been modified. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what path it's in, and to restore it, you would just simply hit checkbox and then hit next. But coming back over to our PowerPoint here, this does give you the most flexibility in what you'd like to restore back to, though. If you'd like to do P2P, physical to physical, physical to virtual, virtual to physical, or any of those, a lot of times the agent backup with a file level backup is going to give you the most flexibility. We also find that customers that are running legacy OSs, they're not going to be available for the image level backup. It's only Windows 7 64-bit or above. So in those cases, you'll need to use that file level backup. Now, if you guys are going to have a virtual environment, the agentless backups, of course, is for the hypervisor-based backups. They're block-level backups, so we're doing change block tracking, snapshot-based, so it's built within the actual hypervisor itself. We support instant recovery, allowing you to bring up any of those machines immediately. Something I forgot to mention was the application restore. My apologies. The application aware is a feature that's specifically for VMware. It basically allows us to log in through VMware tools to signal to SQL or Exchange that we're about to take a backup. What we would do is we would come under the properties for the virtual machine that we want to set that for and give it credentials that have both local administrator, so VMware tools can log in, as well as sysadmin rights over the SQL instance so we can signal to SQL that we're about to take a backup. This just causes the virtual machine to stop doing any SQL data just for a little bit for us to complete that snapshot and then continues on as per normal. That way you know that the virtual machine wasn't in the middle of updating a million tables at the time. The agentless backups are OS agnostic though, so if you're running Solaris, NetWare, or anything else like that, at the end of the day, it's just a virtual disk to us. So at that point, you do get a lot more flexibility with that as well. For anything that's within that VMware environment, we can protect it. We also have a feature that's not talked about a lot, which is the SAN Direct for VMware backups. What SAN Direct is if we have a direct path to the storage within your VM environment, either because we're part of that same virtual host or vCenter and we have access to a shared storage target, or if it's available via ICE because you're a fiber channel to us, basically when we go to do the backup, we'll ask VMware where it exists and attempt to connect to that storage directly. If successful, we'll go do a SAN Direct backup. So instead of going SAN, VMware, or Unitrends, it goes directly from SAN to Unitrends. Our new image level backup, of course, is the block level backup for physical PCs. It allows faster backups of millions and millions of small files. It adds source side deduplication, which reduces the network bandwidth. To explain that, if anybody's not familiar with deduplication, deduplication is basically as we bring in that block data, we are able to break it into chunks which get hashed, and every time I see a duplicate hash, I have a duplicate chunk, which means it can be deduplicated. So when we do source side dedupe, what that means is we're calculating the hashes on your actual server and then sending the hashes to the Unitrends box, which tells us which blocks need to be sent. So it can reduce network bandwidth as well. The image level agent, of course, allows us to do instant recovery on the appliance, VMware Hyper-V as well, which can be really great for any small critical servers that you have that really don't change a lot if you just want to be able to have a quick and easy way to spin that thing up. It is not for clusters. It doesn't have volume level exclusions today. If you have a SQL server, this does not do log truncation for you. So you may need to have your own separate SQL maintenance job to do that log truncation as well. And it is for Windows 7 64-bit and above. We do rarely recommend that you look at the support matrix that I mentioned before that explains what should I protect this with, because this is going to be your best bet to measure this and seeing how complicated it is. And it's not complicated, it's flexible. How flexible we are in the ability that we give you to protect your machines. We can really, really meet any RTO and RPO requirement that you have. We can validate it and more. But, I'm sorry, back to PA, here we go. The application protection, we support Microsoft SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, and Oracle databases natively. If you have other non-standard databases like Postgres, MySQL, or DB2, in those cases, in most situations, we will ask you to just run your own flat file backups as recommended by the vendor, and then we would pick those flat files up. The recovery assurance we talked about as well, where we can create a data copy access job so we can validate business applications in their entirety. We can do sandbox testing for any kind of labs that you'd like, and really, really validate that your backups will come up within the time frame that you have, and that we're meeting your goals as far as how much data you're willing to lose. Troubleshooting, the most common things that we run into, you're going to want to check things like the CPCBP logs directory and the Windows event logs. The large majority of our logs go to those locations, and that's where we usually start first. Some of the more common issues that we run into with Windows machines is multiple VSS providers. If you're running a product like an older version of Backup Exec, for example, or some certain versions of Shadowcraft, they actually install their own VSS provider that can interfere with our ability to do backups. There are ways to work around this or just to remove those, and that's covered in that KB there. Another common problem we run into is where SQL backup permissions are not set correctly. By default in 2012 and above, the SQL local system user does not have sysadmin rights. You may find that your differentials or transactionals are failing as a result. Just have to update the permissions, and again, that's covered there. The last one is another common thing that we see is the NTFS journal has wrapped. That specifically refers to the way that we do our change tracking within Windows. If you have a Windows machine, we are actually keeping track via a journal of what files have changed since the last backup. If too many files change in between our backups, what will happen is that the journal will fill and wrap past the point where we last saw a file changed, meaning we don't know what files changed anymore. So we would ask you to run a new full at that time. This KB explains how to increase that journal if you need to get that error to go away. And oftentimes just increasing the rapidity of your backups from, say, 24 hours to 12 hours can make a really big difference there as well. I have a page here that will be available to you guys with links to all of the documentation that we have online for all of these features and stuff. I know there's a lot of material that we covered today, but we're happy to answer as many questions as we can along the way. And of course, if you guys want to work with me in the future, I am available for evaluations. You just have to talk to your sales rep and say, hey, I want to go through an evaluation and try this out in my environment, and we'll help you get it deployed out. But for now, I think we're going to go ahead and start moving over to the question and answer. And I see one that we have from Bob Stoll already. Can you go over how backups and recovery work with hyperconvergence environments like scale computing? So Scale does not currently provide an API for us that we would be able to do our backups through. So in that case, what we would have to do is we would have to treat those virtual machines as if they were physical servers and use our agents. So either the agent-based backup or the image-level backup would be a valid solution for that, depending on the server that you're trying to back up. The biggest downsides to this, obviously, is with Scale, you don't have the ability to do instant recovery or things like that because just the APIs aren't there and we don't have that level of integration. But you would be able to do file-level recovery. You'd be able to do the image-level backups. You'd be able to do any application protection that you'd like to do. But specifically, the block-based backups through snapshots and things, unfortunately not supported just yet. Is there any other questions I can answer today?
Yeah. Hey, Justin, it's Chris. Yeah, there's a few more questions in the Q&A box.
I'm looking in the chat box, not in the Q&A box.
It's all good. We had them come in both. So
here we go, Q&A.
Yep.
Cool. Alrighty. Sorry about that, guys. I'm running a Nutanix cluster. What are the pros and cons for using a file level versus Nutanix backups? So obviously at the Nutanix backup level, we can only do the full disk at that point. We don't have any disk level exclusions. So you wouldn't be able to do, for example, like if you had a temp file or something like that you didn't want to back up, or any kind of file level exclusions if you're doing the snapshot based backups. The only thing is that those snapshot based backups are very, very fast through Nutanix. They've built an infrastructure around it to be able to provide us those change blocks very quickly and easily. And again, if you have millions and millions of small files, that's where your biggest difference is going to be. At the file level backup, we have to get each individual file versus a block if we're getting at a block level. So both are totally valid options, though. There are just pluses and minuses to those. Will instant recovery be available for Nutanix AHV cluster backups? This is actually not our limitation right now. Nutanix does not provide a way for us to present external storage to the cluster. Once Nutanix gives us the ability to have a NAS, so to speak, coming from our appliance and attach it to Nutanix, then we would be able to use the instant recovery feature because we would have a way to migrate it out of our data store and onto the Nutanix cluster data store. This is something that we're working very closely with Nutanix on, and we are hoping to have over the next year. There was a question from Bill Lloyd. Can you speak about your approach to retention? Yes, I can bring that up here in just a moment. Let me go ahead and tab back over. So under the configure page here, if we come under, so you'll see that there's a section here called manage retention. This is something that may look new to some of you if you're coming from one of our older appliances. The older appliances were on something what we called min-max retention, where you would just set what your minimum legal hold was and what your maximum, I don't want more to back up more than this, retention limits. And now we've actually replaced it with what we call our long-term data retention manager. What you're able to do is you're able to create policies in here that specify how many dailies, weeklies, monthlies, and yearlies you'd like to apply to a specific machine. And after creating these policies, what you would do is you would just simply set them at the individual asset. So for example, my SQL Server here, if I come under the Edit menu, I can come down to the bottom and choose what retention policy I'd like to apply there. So if I want to keep this for 30 days only, this would go through and find any backups that were outside of those 30 days and say these are ones that are going to be purged as a result. An important thing to also mention, we do have the ability to set up SLA policies. For any of our customers that are running the min-max, this is actually something that's commonly used more than anything else, just simply because you can come through and select whatever machines you'd like to back up, how often you want to back up, if you want them to go to the cloud, if you want them to go to cold archive, and then if you're using min-max retention, you can set it here. Otherwise, it just needs to be set within the retention policies as well. But this makes it very, very easy to separate any of your machines by an SLA policy that says this has to be backed up every 12 hours and it needs to go to the cloud, for example. The next question I have here is from Dan. Can the Instant Lab be brought online on an external NAS? So to answer that, the Instant Lab feature utilizes the instant recovery feature, which means that the data hasn't actually left the Unitrends appliance yet. It means that it's running from our deduplicated storage, but if you want to, you can use the Replicas feature, so you could have a NAS attached to your VM environment that you have a warm replica already restored to that could then be used within your data copy access jobs for instant labs, testings, or failovers. Does that answer your question, Dan? I hope I answered everyone else's as well.
I think so. I think so, Justin. Yep, perfect. Thanks, Justin. Fantastic.
Awesome.
I think, guys, if you guys, you have more questions, please feel free to reach out. We will be happy to answer those. Just a final PSA, we're going to continue to do these, so hopefully you guys found value in today's presentation. We have our next one scheduled for August 7th, so please be on the lookout for the next invite. Should be coming your way shortly. So thank you so much. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Tommy. And thank you for everybody else for attending today. And hope everybody has a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. Thanks so much.